So I've taken everything off the front end again. I'm going to get down here and start working on my chin spoiler. What I did notice though is when I drilled this plate here in the frame out to be able to mount the crash bar, this is a pretty thin piece of metal, maybe 3/16 or something like that. It's not even a 1/4 inch. And there's only like 3 threads, maybe 2 even, just holding that bolt in. So I got a rivet nut that I'm going to go ahead and sink in there. And you may be able to see in there, that's threaded. So once I get this locked in, it'll be a lot more secure for the bolt that I'll have going through there. So the chin spoiler is pretty cool. The bolts that came with it are not the right thread pitch for the holes they thread into. They actually thread into the same holes as the voltage regulator. So you pull those bolts out, put these through, and then I'll probably put another nut on there somehow to actually keep the voltage regulator tight up against its mount. So I will have to get the right length and proper pitch bolts for that. And then up here is where, right behind there, is where the top of the crash bar is going to mount up. So I'll have to do a little bit of modification here to be able to get the crash bar to mount, but that shouldn't be that big a deal. But it's going to be a pretty cool chin spoiler. Mounts right up. It's already contoured at the bottom, so that should be pretty cool. So I've spent the past hour or so trying to go ahead and mod this chin spoiler up. And I know I've got 2 ugly bolts in there. The chrome socket head bolts I got are about 3/4 inch too long, so I'm going to have to replace those. So what I ended up having to do was thread a couple of bolts in from the back through the regulator with a coupler on there, and then run bolts through the front into that coupler. That way I can keep the regulator tight to the frame and then tighten these bolts down into the regulator so everything stays nice and tight. I'm going to have to create a mount on the bottom because that doesn't sit flush and tight all the way back. So I'll create a mount somewhere in the bottom down there, maybe connecting to the frame. But I also had to go through and cut parts of the chin spoiler because I didn't want to cut the entire top off just so that the crash bars could fit. So I just took some time to cut an opening out there and run the bolt through the middle so that the whole top of the chin spoiler stays intact and I can still get the crash bars on. That's what it's looking like so far. All right, as I'm going through and test fitting everything to make sure it fits, you saw in the last clip that I got the chin spoiler all done, hooked up, had to make some cuts and modifications to it so that the upper crash bar mount could actually get up to the frame, but it turned out nice. I took all the bubble wrap off of the crash bar so that I could mount the lowers. So those are the Harley lowers that I got specifically with that Harley crash bar because they have the vent on it down here. Have the vent on it down there. Sorry, I was looking at the vent and not at the camera. The speakers will go there. They mounted up pretty easy, pretty straightforward. There's only 2 mounting points on them. The only problem I had was on this side, on the right side of the bike, the reservoir brake, the rear brake reservoir hits the vent, and so I can't mount it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this. I'm going to cut this arm off, and I'm going to create a different arm, different mounting point, and I'll probably come right off of this bolt and go straight up with it so that the reservoir sits farther back, and it'll probably be like here instead of forward and banging on the vent. But I think that'll be pretty easy. I'm going to be linking the brakes anyway. I'm going to be connecting both the front and rear to this rear brake pedal. So I was thinking about getting a different master cylinder anyway, one with a larger bore, just to be able to push more pressure. But I haven't gotten that yet. Still working on the logistics of how that'll happen. But that's where it is so far. With the lowers on the front, now the front's starting to look nice and fat, like the back end. So it doesn't look so awkward having this super wide rear end and a very narrow front. My handlebars are getting powder coated right now, so once they get back, then I'll start with them and the internal controls and such. But coming right along. Fitted the first of my floorboards. As you can see, the shifter is off. I'm going to go with a nicer style heel toe shifter, which of course means I have to go with something Harley style or aftermarket, which means that I have to work with that shift rod because the splines are different and the rod itself is a different size. So that's got to be custom made. Basically cut half of a Harley shift rod off and weld it to the remainder of the Roadstar shift rod, and it'll work it itself out. But anyway, that's one of the floorboards is on, and that's one of the mounts I got from Tom Lento of Punch Designs. So I've been trying to figure out for the longest time what I'm going to do for turn signals and running lights, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with the front of the bike. And I've got a couple of different sets of turn signals in the garage, neither of which I really care for. But then I found these. These are Custom Dynamics lower fairing inserts. And because I have those Harley touring bags, because of the type of speakers I wanted to have and the crash bar I wanted to have, these are actually going to work really nicely. So these are running lights, and then when you turn the turn signals on, they flash, and then once the turn signals are off, they go back to being white running lights. Excuse me, I'm obviously not going to have an upper fairing on there, so those lights up at the top aren't going to count. That's not going to be on there. But these are going to be really cool, and I can't wait to put them on. I also got a relay because they're LED, so it keeps them flashing at a normal pace. And this is also a diode because I have a single directional indicator light on the dash that keeps from having bleed over. So once I get to installing those, I will record it. But that's pretty cool. So I went ahead and popped in my my running light slash turn signals. It's super easy. It was literally just pop out one panel that was in there and put these back in. Now these are plug and play for a Harley, which is obviously not going to work for this bike. So I've got the plugs here, and I've got all kinds of other little gizmos and gadgets that go with it that would go up and plug in a Harley behind the upper fairing. So I've got a couple of other plugs to a diode and another plug to make sure that it flashes at the right speed and doesn't have bleed over from one signal to the other. So I just need to get that wired up, but I think those are going to be very cool. All right, so I'm here picking my handlebars up. Just got them powder coated by my man Nick right here. Nick, tell us about yourself. What is it you do? What you trying to do?
Custom powder coater. The name of the company is NGM Coatings, mainly automotive parts, motorcycle parts, anything that'll fit inside my oven. 6 foot tall, 3 foot wide, 3 foot deep. I can bring all your parts back to life as long as they're within reason.
So yeah, I decided to bring my stuff to Nick. I've got like 3 powder coaters between my house and Nick, and I've used 2 of those 3. But young up-and-comers want to give an opportunity to grow their business, so I always want to give somebody a shout and give somebody a shot and make sure that they can deliver something for folks that are watching what I'm doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very welcome. All right, y'all.
So I got
my handlebars back, all powder-coated, black, looking nice and shiny. My internal controls are actually a little too big for the internal portion of the bar by about, I don't know, 3 millimeters maybe. So what I'm going to do, I do have to cut this bar down slightly in order to put the new internal controls and grip on there. And so what I'm going to do is tape this thing off, get it measured, get it cut. I can't run any cables or anything through it yet. But that's my next task. I'm probably going to do that on Monday as long as my machinist is in the shop. So I'm going to go ahead and mask this thing off now so I can get to cutting, measuring, all that good stuff in preparation for doing that.